Recreating these historic replicas are a way for us to preserve our history, since most of these buildings that he has recreated are gone now. They've been torn down to progress and development. But because of Ron, they're not lost to us. He provides a way for us to preserve these parts of our history and for history to live on for our current and future generations. So please help me welcome Ron Maxfield.
Okay, well, thank you for having me today. I have a lot to do, as we know. Trying to cram everything to 45 minutes will be a real task, but I think we can get it done. First off, if you want to know anything about electric railway, this is where everything came from. This is the Texas Electric Railway by John Myers. John is a good friend of mine, and John wrote this book many, many years ago. They're out of print, but you can probably find them on eBay. So if you look hard enough, you might be able to find a copy. So anything you want to know about Interurbans is in here. Now, John does focus mostly on the Texas Electric, which is what I'm focusing on, but he has everything about the Interurbans that came out of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, not just the Texas Electric. There were several different companies, and all of them have a chapter in this book. So this is a good book to get a hold of. Now, I am a model train enthusiast. Yes, I do love steam engines, but obviously the electric trolleys, Interurbans, were a bit of a competition for a time for the steam engines. But it's a good piece of history. I think it was very interesting. It was at a very unusual time of technology. The Interurban was the cleanest, the fastest, most easy to get on and off of. That's why it has such a strong competition with steam trains. But it was very short, and the reason of that is that it came at a time in technology when it basically was driven out by the development of the modern roadways and affordable cars. Once those came into being, electric railways kind of went down. Now, interesting thing today, with economy as it is and energy as it is, those would be very practical to have something like an Interurban. But at the time, it was the thing. It came out in the late 1890s, and by the time it got to Corsicana in 1913, it was really in its heyday. It went out in 1941 in Corsicana, which if they'd held out just one more year, they would have had a resurgence because of World War II. But I'll get to that a little bit. Now, as you see up above you here, or you will see in just a second, there is a map just showing basically the Corsicana line. Now, originally what we had was the original line went up to the top to Denison. And then from there on, it began to branch out. You see one going west, one going east toward Terrell. You see all these different things, but I'm focusing mostly on the Dallas to Corsicana line, which is the one that I'm modeling, which is the one I have most of my history interest into. So, and then you see this is the logo of the company that I'm into. Now, John Myers is really into Texas Electric, and that's his favorite part. But as I always kid around with John, is that I like the early days of the Interurban when it first began. And this is the logo of the Southern Traction Company, which is what went from Dallas to Corsicana and also Dallas to Waco. But I'll get into that a little bit more too. But if you notice the point, it says the home Interurban. The reason it said that, there were several companies from outside the state, one particularly from Boston, that was trying to build interurban cars, build interurban lines in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Since these were out-of-state companies, the one that I'm talking about was started in Waxahachie and went on to Dallas to be organized, and that is called the home Interurban, just because they wanted to make the distinction that they were from here. They were a Texas company. So as it went on from there, this is one of the first interurban cars that went into the Corsicana area. Is 310. Now, there were 20 cars that were passenger cars, numbered from 300 to 320. And as you see, there were beautiful cars. Let's see if I can manage it. Here we go. Motorman had his own little compartment up the front. Right behind it was a baggage door. There wasn't a lot of room for baggage, but if you wanted baggage or anything like that, you could put it inside this door. This was not for passengers to enter through. All passengers entered through the back. On both sides, you had step-ups into the car. And you had two compartments. You had a smoking compartment, and you had just a regular compartment here. In the back area, there was a restroom, and that's pretty much how the middle part of that car would have looked. Now, you notice it has two trolley poles on it. The reason for that is that sometimes they had, in some areas, different voltage. Now, I don't know all the technical terms of how that works, but you have two different voltages in that. They had to switch the trolley poles out. Unique thing about the Southern Traction Car Company trolleys is that they were single-ended. What that means is that these cars travel one direction only. There was no motorman's compartment or anything to drive it from the back, as compared to the earlier trolley cars and some other companies where you had double-ended, where you had a motor from one end to the other, or the controls to it. And if you want to turn around, all you did was take the pole down, switch it around, and put the trolley pole back up on the wire. And that was a standard thing for most trolley cars, local trolley cars, and some interurbans. But for this case, the Southern Traction was one-ended only. Now, this is an interior of a typical Southern Traction. This was made, photo was taken as it was being constructed. The seats, we kind of look similar to like a bus, a school bus seat. The thing you see atop those little wires, those are the fare monitors. It tells you, whoops, here's the cursor. If you look there, you can see these little gauges. What that is, if you looked at it closely, you would see the amount of money that it took to go on there. So if you got on right up here is a fare box, right here, and that would give you the amount of money for a fare to get on one of these cars. This is from the back looking forward, so if you would look over here, this would be the motorman's compartment where the guy that's driving this thing is sitting. This is in the back compartment. You can see this wall here divides the back from the front, which smoking was allowed in the front of it. It makes no sense because you smoke up there, all the smoke's going to blow to the back, but that's the way it was back then. The guy would be standing from taking the picture. He's just to the left of him would be the restroom, and it's just a one-holer restroom. Interesting thing about that is that I have some original signs too that I had for this car that we're restoring down there. The sign says, "Do not pull the chain at the station." And there's a reason for that. I think it's an obvious reason, because that's the way it was designed. Okay. There was a water fountain right next to it. You'll see later some pictures showing little paper cups where you can get something to drink. You have all these racks up here for coats and hats. So this was a typical, and of course it's not air conditioned. That was your air conditioner right there. Just open these vents up.
Are those heaters on the walls?
No, those are little, what are those things? I think those are, I don't know, it'll come to me. I think they put little pamphlets and things in there. They're little shelves, little racks. And on the bottom there was a match strike. So if you're going to smoke something, they had a little strike there you can strike your match on. So they had all the comforts you can imagine.
Am I right in thinking it's
1880 is the no, that's 880. That's the shop number. Again, this is a builder's photo. These cars were built in St. Louis Car Company in St. Louis, and this is a builder's photo showing when it was built. These were actually built in 1913. Yeah, 1913. But that just shows the builder's number. Now, as things started out, that the mule car system, the earliest streetcar transportation in Corsicana was the mule car. This is the only photo we have of the mule car. That was in the late 1880s. It was first operated, and the opening day was on the day that the Navarra County Fair opened in 1889. This shows the mule car going up Beaton Street. If you're familiar with Corsicana, that is Beaton Street, and if you were just a little ways this way, you would see the State National Bank building. So this is looking north, and that's a mule car. You can barely see the little mule up in front of the car, and that's how the street transportation started out. Then they went electric. When they electrified it, they pulled all the mule car rails up and replaced them with electric railing. It's a different gauge, and you see the pole up there. And again, these would be double-ended. You could run it from this end or that end. When you got to the end of one of the streets near 28th Street, they would stop and just basically pull the pole around so you can go back the other direction. So this is what electric transportation was like with the rail in that early day. Then they began with the interurban. This is building of the tracks in Garrett. And so this, and you notice, of course, everything, if you're running it this way, you have to use regular locomotives. So you look at the back, you can see the back of a steam locomotive on the track. They ran the same gauge, so the steam train would pull you see how they're laying this, one cross tie after another, like that with that mechanism. So they're laying tracks going south from Dallas down to Corsicana. And this is the very first car that would have been in Corsicana. Now, the picture itself is not taken in Corsicana. I have a reason for that. I'll tell you about that in a little bit. But it was in 301, and this picture was taken in Ennis, but it's on its way to Corsicana for the very first run, and that is coming up in September of 1913. So in the early 1900s, J.F. Strickland of Waxahachie began organizing the interurban system. Now, he started with the acquisition of a small interurban system operating between Sherman and Denison, and then extending it to Dallas. He named the system the Texas Traction Company. So the Texas Traction Company, I don't have a picture of that up here, but I have a full book of pictures up here. The Texas Traction cars were double-ended. You could go one way or another by switching the trolley poles around. And it went from Denison down to Dallas, back and forth from there. It was called the Texas Traction Company. And then in 1911, this was in 1906, they named it the Texas Traction Company. In 1911, Stone and Webster out of Boston was constructing an interurban line out of Dallas, heading south toward Waco. But before it was completed, Strickland's company bought them out and acquired their existing rolling stock. Strickland then continued construction to complete a line from Dallas to Waco and a second from Dallas to Corsicana, naming it the Southern Traction Company. Now, it's because he did buy out that Boston company that he came up with the logo, the Home Interurban. So the logo for the Southern Traction Company had that star logo on the side. You can barely see it. It's right there. And now they were two separate companies originally. You had the Texas Traction going from Dallas to Denison, and you had the Southern Traction going from Dallas to Waco, another line going from Dallas to Corsicana, but they had the same board, but they were organized under two different companies. It wasn't until 1917 that the two merged and became the Texas Electric Railway. So that's why you have two companies under one board, but later they were renamed. As I always talk with John Myers, my passion is the Southern Traction Company. I just love the Southern Traction. His passion is the later version of the Texas Electric, though we both enjoy all this history of the early interurbans. Now, the miniature that you see over here shows where the cars first came in. Now, when it came into Corsicana, it was just at Post Oak Creek Bridge where it stopped, and they were late in putting in the rest of the trackage where it got there. So it should be noted that, as I talked about the two interurban companies, and that they fell behind in the schedule operating, so that October 18th of 1913, the line opened, but it had fallen short of being downtown. Now, when it came into Waco in 1913, Interurban reached that, and there was a great fanfare. They had bands playing, they had parades and speeches, but that didn't happen in Corsicana because of the delay of not being able to get the tracks in time. They had to stop at Post Oak Creek and get people in there and go back and forth to Dallas. Later, they were able to extend it over into what you see right here in this scene. So this is where the original Interurban would actually start taking passengers in town. Now, it's a big mystery. I haven't figured it out. John Myers hasn't figured it out yet. But when it was stopped there to go to Dallas, we don't know how it turned around. Again, it was a single-ended car. So how they did it, we don't know. They haven't figured that part out yet. But in the early days, they had to stop at Post Oak Creek, and then a few weeks later, they had to stop in front of the IWF building. But later on, they then were able to bring it down to the final terminus station. So let's see. It went December before the tracks reached Main Street and 7th Street. By the time the public celebration, it was considered anticlimactic. So they said, we're not going to do it at that point. So there you go. So that shows a model of it. As you see, the car here is going north. And what you see on the side is the local trolley system. The local trolleys consisted of 4 cars that I showed you earlier, the yellow and red combination. They're called single trucks. They had 2 double trucks they bought in 1907. That's what you see there. It's one of the 2 yellow cars, which was a double truck. Had 2 trucks on it with the same swivel trolley pole on it. And as often happened for most all towns is that if you had a local car system, they merged. Once you got into town, the interurban and the local system used the same trackage. So when the interurban came in, it would join right there in the corner, and it would share the same track with the local trolley. This interurban car would go straight down south to the terminus station, and the single little trolley would also go the same route, but then veer off when it came toward the station line. So I don't have a map of it with me today, but there is a big map that shows where the trolleys went to the local areas and also when the interurbans came back and forth from Dallas. What you see there is a car going toward Dallas, You can tell that by the position of the freight door. Also in the signage, if you look at the front of the signage there, it says Dallas. You'd have a Dallas plate if you're going to Dallas. When they turn around and came to Corsicana, they'd take that out and put another plate in that said Corsicana. So as it continues on, this is actually what you would see in this model here, a close-up of it. The original cars were very beautiful. They were Pullman green, standard color Pullman green, as like train cars, with gold leaf striping, red tile windows, red freight doors. They had 2 bullseye lamps on the front. Now what you see here is a marker system that was used for nighttime. If you notice the front, you have a lamp, be a gas lamp that is clear light. The ones in the back are green. So you could see at night, tell which way the Interurban car was going by seeing if you had the green markers in the back or the clear markers in the front. During the daytime, you had white flags on the front. You had green flags on the back. That way you would tell which direction the car was going. Some cars, like the Texas traction cars, had clerestory windows. You know, those windows at the top where you see it's really pretty. You see the little lights up on the top there. The Southern traction cars did not have that. They were just smooth across the top. Those things on top are just the air vents. So that was the air conditioner of the day. So if you want to cool the car down, they'd open up the little vents, and as they speed along, it would suck that stuff in there. Now, these cars were pretty fast. You could get from Corsicana to Dallas on an express car about a little under an hour. So it didn't take very long. And that's one of the things that was real popular about the Interurban. Let's see, that's okay. Just show the first car up there. Try to stay with my notes. So here we go. So the passenger cars of the Southern Traction Company were built by St. Louis Car Company. Passenger cars had 300 series, consisted of 20 cars. Passenger trailers were designated as 400s. So you can tell by the numbers which kind of car it was. If you see a picture of an Interurban car that has a 400, that means it has no motor. It means it's just a trailer. It's being pulled. An example of that is right here. You'd see the car 304. You see that part of the back, that's a trailer. It looks exactly like the front car, but it has no motor. It's simply pulled along. They weren't used very often. There weren't very many of those 400 series. They found after the cars were going for a few years that the cars were really not very useful, and they would convert these trailers into something else. But in the beginning, this early day, it would be used for passenger. And then they would have certain events, say like a county fair, where you could rent the whole train car and you could put a trailer onto that. So this is obviously a situation like that. What you have here in the top, you'd have the motorman, and then you'd have the 2 conductors. Each car would have its own conductor, so that's why you have 2 of them standing there. This guy is probably doing something along with the trackage. So you have 2 motormen, you have a motorman, and you have 2 conductors to cover both of these cars. Now, if you notice that these motormen here, sometimes they would have long ties, but this motorman never wore a long tie. He wore a bow tie. Anybody care to guess why the motorman always wore bow ties? Didn't want to get that thing caught into you have all the mechanism with the brake system. You have also a swan neck brake wheel that's in there, and just for caution, they didn't get that caught in there. They always wore bow ties. So when you look at these pictures, you always notice the motormans are going to wear bow ties. Also notice the bullseye headlamps. So this is what tells you this is an early car, because only the early cars had the 2 large bullseye headlamps. The reason for that, they were arc lamps, very strong, very powerful, and they started getting complaints in Dallas. When they started going to Dallas with those arc lamps, it blinded everybody. So if you see later versions of the car, you'll notice it will have a bullseye light on the bottom, but the top will be a simple incandescent. And the reason for that is they would use the bullseyes out in the open country. Once they got into town, they would have to switch out and go with the top lamp, which would be a much smaller lamp, much weaker light. But in the outside country, in this time, those bullseye headlamps, and have you ever seen arc lamps? Arc lamps are very bright. So those things just light up the whole countryside as they go along. So you see that trailer there. This is going now into the station. This is the original station house, and I'll give a little more detail about that. When they finally went past the lodge and went down to the end of Beaton Street where the train depot is, well, to know where that happened, if you go to Corsicana now and you see the little visitor center, that's where the original train depot was, just off to that side. And the Interurban car that we're restoring is sitting there. right across from that catty-cornered, you'll see a pawn shop. And where that pawn shop is now, that's where the Interurban station was. The car would come down Beaton Street, turn off onto Collin, go down Main, and then turn into the station. So what you see now is the back of the freight station. This freight station is kind of unusual looking, and you'll see other pictures of it that make it look really strange, but it was a house. It was somebody's house that was bought. The guy's name was F.W. Carruthers, a very prominent landholder in Corsicana, and he had a large estate at the south end of Beaton Street. And as the town began to develop, starting with the train, of course, the first depot built down there, he sold all the part of that land off to the depot for the H&TC train, and then later the cotton belt comes through there. But his house remained at the corner where those tracks crossed. But later, he passed away in 1900. So his family then sold it to a Elks Lodge. And from there, when the Interurban came down, they decided that was the perfect place to use as a station because he still had plenty of property around the house that they could actually make a track yard and go around it and then use that as a freight station. So this is showing the back of it. You see two freight motors here. On the other side, you see a passenger motor, number 314 there. Well, that kind of squeezed in. So you're not really seeing a proper perspective. It's a panoramic shot. But if you look at it, this is a hotel on the corner. You see the freight station on the left and the Interurban cars coming out. The one in the back is a passenger trailer. And then this is a miniature that I built several years ago. If you want to see the original miniature, go to Navarre County Courthouse. It's on display there. And the miniature has an example of every car that was used in the Southern Traction. I have one of every kind. So if you want to see what all the rolling stock looked like, that's the easiest way to do it, is go look at that. It was right behind this hotel. And the thing significant about the hotel is that just behind it on the two-story level, that's where the ticket station was. Now, when it was first developed, you would go from Beaton Street into the ticket station, which was next to the hotel, buy your ticket, come out the back, and board the train, right where you see here. So as people would come in, what you'd notice, they would come out the back. There's a little place there that they could wait, had a little brick plaza. Then they go in and board the train right here and pull out. This was only used for freight, so this was a freight station. And if you see the side of it, you will see the shipping dock and then some other photos of this. You see the side, that gives a better perspective. You see the train here ready to go. It's ready to go to Dallas. It's pulling out. Still dirt streets at the time. The Electric Express Company was the name with all the freight areas for the Texas Electric Railway. So you see the dock there. You see the freight doors have been built into the side of the house. Over here you'll see some work motors. You'll see an Osgood Bradley car that was part of the acquisition when they bought out Dallas Southern Traction. And then you see all the wagons pulling up there to load into here, and they would come out the back and load up into freight cars. And as we go along, we'll talk more about the freight cars. Now this house, as it originally looked, was like that. Just a beautiful old antebellum styled home. This is the way it looked about 1900. And then they just tore out some of the back little buildings on the side and then turned that into the freight station. Now, the cars were painted Pullman green, as I mentioned, with the tile windows. They had chocolate brown roofs, had one restroom, oak-stained interiors with a green ceiling. In 1917, the Southern Traction logo was replaced by the banner signage of the Texas Electric. So that's when they merged, and they had to change the signage up on it. By the early 20s, the color scheme was changed to a cream and light green color. All these are black and white, so you won't be able to notice all that, but I'll point them out as the cars progress in their style. This was by 1932 that they were painted into the new cream and light green. Cars that traveled to Waco were painted red. Now, if you see a lot of the old pictures, you see some that are colored. If they were bright red, that meant they were designated to go to Dallas and Denison, or they went from Dallas to Waco. But the Corsicana cars were a little different. They were painted blue and green, blue and cream, and they had silver roofs, and they were designated as bluebonnet cars. So you knew just from looking at the car if it was going to Corsicana from Dallas because it was a blue car. If it was a red car, it went the other direction. Now when the Corsicana line closed, Denison line and the Waco line stayed open for a few more years, all the cars then went red. So, but it started out for Corsicana. They always went from the green to the blue. Shows a car leaving town. It's up Beaton Street. Now, if you're familiar with Corsicana, this corner right here is not where the State National Bank building is. So that kind of dates it. You know it's got to be before 1925. So here's a car on its way to Dallas. I always like this picture because it kind of shows the transition in technology. You have a few cars, then you have a mule-drawn wagon coming up on the left. This car heading toward Dallas. So, the sign of the times. Here's this another car coming south, almost the same location. This whoops, went backward. This is where the State National Bank building would be right now. The car is coming now. If you notice on the bottom, this shows the trackage as it turned. It would come down Beaton, then it would turn up Collins Street this way. Notice that as the car began to evolve, you see when I was talking about the bullseye lights, notice the bottom is a regular bullseye light, but the one on the top is a much smaller light. So at nighttime, when it came into town, they'd turn the bottom one off and just leave the top one on. So it didn't blind anybody. If you notice too, carefully you can see, can't see it very well here, but the banner has changed. It's gone now from Southern Traction to Texas Electric Railway. But the cars look basically the same. When they did the merger in 1917, the colors and everything of the car didn't really change. They just changed the banner right there. Now this shows more clearly the 314. Again, it has the original Southern Traction colors, the bullseye headlamp on the bottom, smaller lamp on the top, and on the side you see the Texas Electric Railway banner. That's basically the only change you would have seen in 1917. Now this would be at the time that they went to the two-tone colors. If this was in color, you would see as a lighter green on the top banner and then the bottom. Notice the Southern Traction lettering is all gone. It now says Texas Electric Railway on the side, and that was simply a black and silver. This is car 308. But outside of that, everything else pretty much stayed the same. It still has right now its chocolate colored roof, but later on they began to switch into silver roofs. Now the Interurban also had two work motors. One was called the 911, the other was the 901. No, I'm sorry, not 911, 941 and the 901. They were primarily designed for track construction and maintenance. This shows one of those cars. It's the 941. This is during the Southern Traction era, so it has the Southern Traction colors, the Southern Traction logo. And as you can see, it's just a very small little pocket. You could switch the line around, go backward and forward. It has a pilot on both ends. All the work motors did. And of course you could stack tracks or anything you wanted to on that. There's a very popular picture in Corsicana of the early days showing the other car, the 901, coming down, and it has on it, and I'm not a farmer, you can probably tell me what this thing is, but it looks like a silo. It's short, it's corrugated on the side, it's round, and it's got a little cone-shaped roof on it. They're used in farm, but I saw several of them coming down. But it's on that. If you see a picture of a car coming down the middle of Beaton Street, it's in the 1920s, and it's got a weird looking thing on it, that's car 901, and it's got some kind of farm implement sitting on it. So it was used for some freight service. If the freight cars couldn't haul it, they would use a work motor to do it. That's the only real photo I have. It's kind of out of proportion on this thing. But that's the only photo I actually have of 941. Notice it still used the same marker lights of having the white flag telling you you're going forward. You can barely see it, but there's the green flags on the other side. So it would have been going this direction. It had one bullseye lamp. They could switch it out from one side to the other, depending on what direction they were going. Now this is a model. I have a picture of the 901, but I think just the model kind of gives you a better perspective. It had the sideboards, and it's up higher. They could actually run things underneath it, and it had a lift scaffold that with a crank that they could lift it up. So this is how they could work on trolley wires and whatever else they needed to do. They needed some height, they could do that. Again, it had the standard with the green flags and white flags on the other side. Bullseye headlamps on both ends. You could put some freight in there if you wanted to. And again, that the height was adjustable there for that work motor. Pilots on both ends. Now this is the Interurban had freight motors. They had 5 freight motors. They were numbered 500 series. Now again, passenger series is 300s. The trailers are 400s. The 2 work motors, only 2 work motors in the whole system, and they were 900 series. I don't know why they were so high, but they were 900 series. Then you have the freight cars, and they were the 500 series. And they were designated this way, and there were 6 cars. I should say 6 cars because it was 500 to 505. That would make 6 cars. There are also 2 no-powered cars, freight cars, that were designated as 600 and 601. And they were just like the passenger cars. They were simply the box cars with no motors in them. Now, they were called freight cars, but the more familiar term was box motor. They were more famously known as the box motors. And this is box motor 500. Now, the actual photograph here was taken in Waxahachie, but this would have been in Corsicana quite a bit. It's the original Southern Traction lettering. It would have been the same color as the passenger motors. That's 501. And they were double-ended, so they could run either direction, although this was the primary front. Back would have looked different because there was a door in the back, but that went out the side, but you could actually run it from the back. This thing was totally empty. I mean, it was like a railroad freight car. Outside of the motorman in the front, there was nothing else in there, so it was strictly for freight. 500, the 500 still exists. So any of you historians that are wanting to really go save a car, there is one sitting in a pasture in Athens, Texas, and it's the 500. It's still sitting out there. It's still, you can still recognize it. I technically bought it 20 years ago, but I didn't have enough money to move it. So I had to pull my money out of the deal. I had it secured, but I couldn't move the thing, so I had to let go of it. And that was 30 years ago. If you go out today, it's a little more worse for wear, but it's still workable. So if anybody wants to buy it and restore it, it's there. That's what it would look like if you put it all together. Now, this is another box motor. This is in 1924, I believe, and it's behind the old station. Now, one thing that happened with the station, they added onto the house. You can see brick right behind the car. They put a wing onto it, make additional freight compartments to the old freight station, so you can see the back of it there. But the freight car itself, the box motor, is hauling Wolf Brand chili off to Dallas. So you see all the banners there. Lyman's famous Wolf Brand chili. And that box motor is sitting there ready to go. You can see the trackage of the backyard. The track would spin around the other side where it could actually take in the freight. And then this one, a passenger car would come this direction and spin out to the outside so it wouldn't interfere with any of the freight work there. Now notice in the very back, this is interesting, it's very rare. See the car up behind it is a Colestri window, which means it was not part of the Southern Traction fleet. It would have been part of the acquisition of the Dallas Southern Traction, or it could have been a Texas Traction car. Whatever it could have been, they took those cars and converted them into freight cars and also into parlor cars. And I've stole this from that table over there to show you what a parlor car looks like. They took those old cars with the Colestri windows and transferred them, made them into parlor cars. I think there were 2 parlor cars. There was a parlor car A and a parlor car B. This would be one of those 2. The rest of them they turned into freight cars, which you'll see that later. I have a picture of one that's been converted. So that had to be one of the old Osgood Bradley Dallas Southern Traction, or it could have been a Texas Traction that was brought down. Now again, the reason they couldn't use the acquisitions of the Dallas Southern Traction is because their gauge was a little bit narrower. I don't know why, but when the Boston company started building them, they built them with a little bit smaller gauge, and they couldn't run them on the Southern Traction line to Corsicana. So they had to put them and take them out of service and take the trucks out and switch them out And then they, again, didn't use them. They took the motors out and just used them as freight cars or parlor cars. Let's see, we're talking about freight motors. Oh, this little chili car. The next one up is an aerial shot of Corsicana. This was taken about 1925. What you can see, this would be going north to Dallas. This is the Interurban track coming down, going over Post Oak Creek. And again, this, when it first opened, they had to board here because they had not finished the track out. Then later, they finally began to pull the track down a little bit, and there's the lodge building that you see in the miniature here. That's where they would board, and the second place they actually started doing the boarding. Then the car would come down, and they finally finished the track out. It would come to the State National Bank building. It would turn left up Collins Street, turn around, come down here, and then go into the station. Now that is the original Carruthers House Freight Depot, although you notice the porch, the two-story porch is gone. To the left of it, you can see the brick annex that was added onto there later. So about 1925, you can see they were starting to strip down a lot of stuff off the old depot, and they had the new addition there. You can see a car. There's a trolley, there's an Interurban car right there. It's coming on its way out. Over here would be the boarding station coming in. People would hop on there. Then it would come back out. You can see the trackage. It would go in front of the hotel, and turn, and then start heading toward Dallas. Straight up to Dallas. So, though the Interurban tried to follow regular schedules, a farmer could flag down a car by just going out to this adjoining property, because that was the convenience of the Interurban. If it went by your property, you could just walk in your backyard, and if the car was going by, you could just wave at him, and he'd stop for you. So that, again, that was the big competition with the passenger trains, is that Interurban picked you up no matter where you were. So if you were on the track and you waved at him, he'd stop. Now, what do you think they did at night if you wanted to ride the train? What do you think happened? They'd light a match. They'd go outside the track and you strike a match, and they'd see that match. They'd pull over and pick you up. Now, again, there was smoking stations on there. There was a non-smoking station of the car. And again, it's kind of weird how it worked that way, because if you were in the smoking section, all the smoke blew back into the non-smoking section. So the Interurban was faster and cleaner than a regular steam train, and they were more efficient for picking people up, just like I mentioned there, off the side of their properties, on the side of the track. And they had, besides the main depots, there were little track stations. If you've seen some pictures of it, it was just a little covering with a bench. You can go and sit there by the crossing, and the Interurban, they saw you out there and you waved them down, they'd stop for you. Now this is another, I was talking about the converted cars of the, that is an old Osgood Bradley car. It's numbered 620. So if you were a freight, you were doing something with freight, a non-motorized freight, it was a 600 series. So besides the two original 600 cars, some more were added. They were given numbers. This is 620. That's an old Osgood Bradley motorized Interurban. It's been converted, because you can see where the Calestri windows used to be. Whoops, wrong button. Those were the windows used to be. They had to add freight doors, and they covered over all the windows. So again, this used to be an Interurban car, an Interurban motorized car. Now turned into a freight car. It's right behind the hotel. As you can notice, that's a familiar sight, and all these posed pictures in Corsicana, they're always right behind the back of the commercial hotel. Commercial hotel's been gone since 1950. But again, the Interurban station is still there. Now, let's see, okay. Freight car was converted from the Dallas Southern Traction, and then the actual car was designated as the 457. Then it was turned into the 620. Coming up next, Interurban car. This is in now the Blue Bonnet Blue. Still has a chocolate brown roof. Like I said, it was later on they began to switch into silver roof, so that makes an early picture. So it would have been Blue Bonnet Blue on the bottom, cream colored in the middle, and a banner of blue across the top. The bullseye headlamps and the other headlamp would have been bright red. Right now it's still in the chocolate brown top. That is the back of the early station. Gives you a good view of what the back of that old Carruthers House station looked like. Another car, 310. And notice now the the logo has changed. They've gone from the banner to now the oval. In most pictures you see of color, you're going to find this is the typical view of that big white and red logo. Still has the chocolate brown top, so this is still an early version. It would have been blue, being a Corsicana car. You can't see it, but behind here, this is the two-story ticket box station. So they came off of Beaton Street, went in there, bought their ticket, came out the back of this building, and right here you can't really see it, but there was a little brick plaza. Now there was a big station war that was going on between the city and the Interurban company, and that they did not have a covered station, and people were complaining they're having to get out in the rain and the weather to get on. But the Interurban company would never build them a covered station. So that was, I don't know why they had that controversy on there, but they were always had to come out and board in the open air. Now this is the station. They finally tore down the Carruthers house, and they built an extended station on the end of it. So this part was part of the old Carruthers house, and then they built this new piece right here where the Carruthers house was. So this is the new Interurban station, and it is still there today, even though the front has been stripped off and made into a regular retail entry, and this is now a pawn shop that is there in Corsicana on this corner. This is on the corner of Main Street and Highway 31. You see here where the trackage was going this way. This trackage here would have been used by the local trolley cars. They would go around the station from this way and follow this, whereas the Interurbans always would go in the back and come out the side. You can see an Interurban car there waiting to leave right there. See the State National Bank building in the background. And now it's on its way out, number 315, on its way up Beaton Street. It would be colored in the Bluebonnet colors. And this was the interior that was redesigned. This would have been the 1930s and forward look. Had a little more padding to the seats, different lighting on the top. Now you can see the toilet, you can see the little cup holder there. And that would be the back of the car. If you look way in the back, you can see 314 ready to go. This is 309. And then the last day, as it would go out, this was February 4th. It was dated 5th of this article, but February, 11 o'clock in the evening, Tuesday, February 4th, the last car was heading out. There's the Corsicana sign being taken off. And 313, it was the last car to go. That is Corsicana signage, which means it would have been in Dallas on its way down. And there's the 305 as it is today. We found that in a trailer park in Acton near Fort Worth, and it was used as a home. The guy found this thing, said this isn't a regular trailer, this is something else, and we went out and found it and managed to salvage it, bring it back to Corsicana. It's the only one that is being restored back to its original look. The rest of them are more like 1930s or 40s look, but we decided to bring that back. I decided to bring it back to a Southern traction look, and John agreed. John said we need one of those, so that is the goal, to make it look like that. It's still there today. And that completes that. If any Q&A, anything you want to talk about?